can get started. It's a cozy group today, which is cool. I like cozy groups. It means we get to we get to have a more intimate conversation. But like I said, there will be ways of consuming this information as well, because what Iris has to say is awesome. She's very passionate about OpenTelemetry, so I'm very excited to have her join us. And Edith works at Farfetch. Yeah, do you want to do like a brief little intro for everybody?
For sure. Hello, everyone, again. My name is Iris. I work as a platform engineer. Yeah, I know this title changes every time. So in my LinkedIn, it could be something different. You know how it is. I'm a platform engineer, part of the observability team currently in Farfetch. I belong as a part of the central team that we provide tools for all the engineering teams across Farfetch to monitor their services, including traces, metrics, logs, and alerting. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
So we're just gonna do this like just a regular Q&A, and because we have like such a small audience, also if we have time at the end, we can y'all are more than welcome to ask questions. It's the purpose of this is to understand what Iris is doing at Farfetch around OpenTelemetry, observability, to help the rest of the community share use cases across the community so that we can all learn from each other, right? So that is that. So first things first, how did you come about to your current role at Farfetch?
So observability has been a part of a build-up for me. When I started my career, I actually started as a software engineer, back-end developer. And because it was a type of company that offered service to different clients, they needed a DevOps engineer. And I was like, okay, I was put there. So I started working very small scale with monitoring, mostly in AWS and Azure, with CloudWatch a little bit, with Insights. And then it started becoming more of a passion for me the more I learned about it. And then I changed the position that I was in, and I started working in a more, let's say, well-equipped observability platform. And that's when I was like, okay, I really, really like this. I heard about OpenTelemetry for the first time and had my chance to touch it a little bit, Prometheus, Grafana. So I saw there was a lot of potential there. And then where I currently am, of course, my previous experience really helped to come now. And it's been 1 year and a little bit of learning and continuously evolving of observability. So now I think I've become pretty good at it. Started
Awesome.
from zero.
Yay, that's the best. And but so how did you hear about OpenTelemetry specifically? Is it like one of those things where someone mentioned it to you? You saw it on the interweb somewhere? Like, what's your story?
I think it was LinkedIn somewhere. I know that I was working. We were working with no traces at the time. I know, blasphemy, and we were looking into tracing solutions. And somewhere on LinkedIn, I saw OpenTelemetry, so I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a try, and made a small POC for my manager. It never went more than that to the POC. It was almost more than 1 year ago, but that's how I heard about it. I really liked it. I had it at the back of my mind. So now that there was an opportunity here in Farfetch, OpenTelemetry came up again. I was like, okay, I like that. I'm going to go for it.
So at Farfetch, what can you tell us a little bit about like the architecture of the system that you're working with, and why observability, OpenTelemetry are so important to that? So I guess we'll start with like, let's give us a sense of like what the architecture is.
So we are around 3,000 engineers currently in Farfetch, only in tech, and we have an extremely complex architecture because we have different types of different sides of the business. So we have cloud native, we have Kubernetes, and we have virtual machines, Ubuntu, Linux, 3 types of different cloud providers. Every team of course, we have uniformity and we have guidelines that needed to be followed, but it's a lot of years in the process, and some things are still like in the past. Every team decides to do things how they are best. So it is a lot of information coming from everywhere and it's not uniform. So for example, we were relying heavily on Prometheus to collect metrics, but some of our applications, some of our engineers, Prometheus was just not a good idea. So we were like, okay, what could be better? Here's OpenTelemetry, the same for the traces. Of course, this will help us not only collect these telemetry signals from places where we couldn't before and from services that were not possible, but also it's helping us put everything in a uniform way, which is amazing.
Very cool. And now what about like your what's your build and deployment process like?
What do you mean by building?
Like in the organization, like what's your CI/CD pipeline like? Is that something that you're involved in to any extent, or?
Not really involved, more to the sense that I use it a lot and I'm in close communication, but yeah, we currently use Jenkins in Farfetch and we have a separate team taking care of that, which tells again how complex everything is. Like we have a teams and everything is segregated in my position is strictly observability, basically everything related to observability, all the tools, deployment, maintenance, and releasing new features on top of what we have.
Okay, cool. So what observability tooling are you using? And you know, if you're using like an observability vendor that you'd rather not divulge, like that's totally okay. But just give us a sense of like maybe your OpenTelemetry stack, how it's set up, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Currently, we're mostly open source and some things that have some tools that have been created in-house by us, but mostly open source. We use Grafana for dashboards. We use Tempo as a data source, which is also part of Grafana, mostly as a tracing backend. That was something new. Sorry for the baby cat in the background. We use Prometheus and Thanos for metrics, and now we have added OpenTelemetry there as well. We used to have Jaeger, and we still do to a certain degree because we still haven't completely moved to OpenTelemetry when it comes to the frameworks that some of the teams are using. So they're working hand in hand, Jaeger, and that's pretty much it. That's all that I can think right now, but these are the main ones: Thanos, Prometheus, Grafana, OpenTelemetry, Jaeger.
Cool. And what about in terms of tell us a little bit about like your organization's OpenTelemetry journey. Is it what you know we hear kind of it's always a mixed bag, right? Like some organizations are like giddy up, more OpenTelemetry observability, yeah, and others are like what was it like at Farfetch?
Well, I'm very proud to say actually that we have a very good observability culture in Farfetch, and it was actually one of the ideas that was welcomed immediately. Okay, OpenTelemetry, let's do it, let's go for it. It took us a bit more time to make some space on our Gantt, on our yearly plan for it, but the moment that it was mentioned, everyone was okay, let's jump to it. We only see positives. We couldn't see any negatives other than the time spent, which is a necessity. And yeah, it was very well accepted. I was surprised and very happy, obviously.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so it sounds like it came like from the top then.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, I don't want to mention names, but some of our senior leaders are very involved in the community and they're like always seeing new technologies and says, hey, what do you think about this? Do you like it? And of course, I'm extremely ambitious and I'm always on the internet, on LinkedIn, seeing for new things to implement. And it's a great combination there.
Oh, awesome. Now, in terms of like your team to start, enabling observability practices and OpenTelemetry, like what did you and your team have to go through in order to make that happen?
Well, the moment that I've joined the team in a point of time, I think the biggest struggle had already passed because observability became a very new thing 3 years ago in Farfetch. And I think the people that struggled the most were the engineers that worked in the team back then. Of course, it was a new thing, observability. Why do we need it? Why is it so important? But I think at the point that I actually joined, everyone had already embraced how important observability is. Well, everyone, of course, that's overestimation, but most of the engineers had already embraced. So for us saying that, hey, we are implementing this this amazing new thing, OpenTelemetry, that everyone had heard about, it's very popular right now, it was embraced immediately. And of course, knowing the benefits that they were getting for it, more metrics, more traces, more uniform way of collecting everything, it was applauded immediately.
And how did your team skill up in terms of being able to start implementing OpenTelemetry? Because it sounds like some people were kind of familiar with it. Maybe I'm assuming it might have been newer to other folks. You said actually when the directive came that your team was going to start, implementing like observability principles, OpenTelemetry, that was something that there was like work involved. So what was the kind of work that was involved in order to enable that for your team?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, well, what we thought at the time was a challenge, was how to release this in patches and in parts, so we didn't do any damage, or that the engineering teams that use observability every day didn't feel the change for the bad. Of course, we would like them to see the improvement. So we thought that that was going to be a challenge. Of course, we were going to move from not one technology to the other, but actually, we always have someone who is a driver for the project, and in this case in my team it was me. So I did a thorough investigation, and every time I was reading something I was like, wow, okay, this is cool, wow, okay, this is amazing, because everything managed to fit together very well for us. Of course, the fact that we use open source really helps. OpenTelemetry has compatibility with Prometheus, with Jaeger, with everything that we were working. So it became easier with the time to just put everything up there.
So it sounds like you were the primary driver for getting people like leveled up on OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. Together with one of the architects that works very
Amazing.
closely with us, we were the biggest pusher and supporters of OpenTelemetry, and now we're in production. So I think we were pretty successful.
That is super, super cool. Yeah, and I don't know that we hear like too many stories of organizations using OTel in production. So I think that's really awesome. And how long did it take you guys to get to the point where you've got OpenTelemetry in production?
So let me see, we plan to start implementing OpenTelemetry around January, and we started the first investigation, gathering information. And I think by the mid-March, we're already ready in production. But again, we are still not there, not 100%. We're still relying on a lot of things with Prometheus and Jaeger. We're just using OpenTelemetry to transport. We still need to do instrumentation with OpenTelemetry. Some parts of our engineering teams are still not using it. But currently, OpenTelemetry is our main transport of our telemetry signals, basically.
So are you are you relying heavily on the OTel collector then to do that for you?
Yeah. Especially with traces. Traces were one of the neglected parts of the observability stack. It's typical because traces are a bit, let's say, more modern, and it takes more time to implement and to actually understand how good they are. Now traces are becoming the it of observability. So it really helped us. OpenTelemetry really helped us get the best of the tracing in Farfetch. We were actually doing some numbers today with our architect, and we were moving around 1,000 spans per second in the past, and now we have 40,000 that flawlessly without even needing to lift a finger. And we're not there yet. We still have a lot to do there.
And so how are you collecting your traces right now? Is it like manual instrumentation, auto instrumentation, combination of both? Like where are y'all out with that?
It's a combination of both. So we have another team working with us that helps provide the instrumentation and the frameworks, because we have a huge variety of languages. So we still have the open tracing framework that teams are still using. We also have some teams using manual instrumentation, and we're also implementing the OpenTelemetry operator with auto instrumentation, mostly for .NET and Java currently. But looking forward for Go, because we have a lot of application running in Go. So our main goal is that very soon we want to have all applications using OpenTelemetry instrumentation, but it's going to be a process that
Right.
can go as slow and as fast depending on the team's pace.
So for the teams who are using Go, which to my understanding, there is no auto instrumentation, what kind of, is there any kind of support that your team provides around that in terms of helping these teams instrument?
Yeah, of course. Well, one of the main teams that uses Go, especially because of the open source, it's my team. But yeah, of course, we provide documentations, we provide guidelines, and there is a lot of very good documentations in the OpenTelemetry as well about manual instrumentation. So basically, we have sessions with engineers not to train them, because I think they can do it better than we can, because it's their code, but just to show them the best practices and to introduce them to that, and to tell them that, hey, our tools are here for you, and they take it from there. It's a team sport, let's say.
Awesome. I love that, because I think what you said is really important, that you're not instrumenting their code for them because it's their code, but that you provide the guidelines on the instrumentation, which I think is super important. Also, I want to call out, Shubhanshu just shared a link in the chat that indicates that there is auto instrumentation for Go. So yay, something to look at. Is that a more recent thing, Shubhanshu?
Yeah, it's a more recent thing, and it's still in a work in progress, but I came across this last week only. And so since you mentioned Go, I was like, okay, go take a look if this is something interests you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. Now all the
I've been following. Sorry, Adriana.
No, go ahead.
No, I've been following it as well, actually, because it's, of course, it's my stack and the things that it's very close to me that are using mostly Go. So I'm like every day, is there news? So it's become like a passion now to go and check.
That's very cool. Now I wanted to ask on the auto instrumentation, because, keeping on that thread, I think you mentioned like you're leveraging auto instrumentation for Java through the OTel operator. Can you share a little bit of like your experience around using the OTel operator? I came across it like maybe a couple of months ago, and for me, I was like, this thing is amazing. So yeah, like it's cool to hear someone who's actually using it. Is that in production right now for you?
Yes, it is partly in production, but it's very isolated. It's not available for everyone. And yeah, operator is amazing. We loved it, and when we discovered it, we were like amazed. The thing is that it is a bit getting used to. We had some challenges when we start. Well, we still do, but especially in the beginning, because the operator and the instrumentation object and the collector. Well, it was my bad, obviously. We were having some certificate issues and trying to rotate certificates, and I was trying to delete something, and they just create. It was like a big mess, and I would just like leave my computer and come back after 30 minutes. Happening because of how coupled the operator and the collector and instrumentation is. But yeah, now we've gotten the hang of it, and it is amazing. One other challenge that I didn't think of it. That's the beauty of it. We were having a discussion with another engineer, and I was complaining that Prometheus cannot target the operator, the collector, and the operator for some reason, and we cannot create alerts from it. And he told me, well, have you tried observing OpenTelemetry using OpenTelemetry and then sending everything to Prometheus? And I'm like, And just like, it's the beauty of it, it's compatible with everything. And yeah, I guess there's challenges every day, but one day at a time.
That's very cool. And now speaking of like, you mentioned like you're ingesting traces I know the log signal is like a newer player in the land of OpenTelemetry. Have you and your team or anyone at Farfetch started playing around with OTel logging as well?
Me, very, very little, mostly consuming from a Kafka topic and see how that goes. It's pretty good, but we know that it is not there yet and it's not stable. So we don't expect it to go into production or to have it part of the day-to-day, because currently we have a huge volume of logs going through Farfetch, more than traces, so a lot more. So yeah, it's not worth risking it, but we're definitely experimenting, and we expect in 1 year from now, OpenTelemetry will be the only receiver that we're going to use for everything.
Oh, cool. So for the little experiment that you've done in using OTel logs, have you taken advantage of like the log to trace correlation, or is that just the logs in isolation? Like how's that been going?
Actually, no, that's a very good suggestion, because I've been focusing mostly just getting things across, and mostly the processing of the obfuscation of the data, because that's something that we would like to use OpenTelemetry, which is amazing for. But no, that's something that it's definitely worth for me to investigate and to do next.
Awesome. What about the metrics signal? How are you ingesting the metrics? Are you like, is Prometheus passing the metrics over to you, and are you like using the Prometheus receiver? Like, I know like from personal experience, when I started playing around with the Prometheus receiver, it was like barely a thing. It was like so unstable. There was a disclaimer. I'm just wondering, have you used the Prometheus receiver, and if so, what's been your experience around that?
Yes, actually, we use the Prometheus receiver. So throughout the instrumentation, just to get this out of the way, we do get some OTLP metrics as well, but the majority of our metrics is Prometheus. So the Prometheus receiver works very good for us, because we already had an observability system in place, and we use console for target control. So it was extremely easy for us to use the receiver, and it can handle a huge amount of data, and it is the scrape configs are the same as in Prometheus. So technically nothing changes. You're just using another tool to scrape all these metrics. It is very straightforward for us. And currently we're using both OpenTelemetry for some scenarios and Prometheus. But yeah, again, in the future, the goal is to use only OpenTelemetry. It's just that it's a process.
And you think then the Prometheus receiver will like be the way to ingest like all of your metrics, and so you'll be able to scrap Prometheus altogether? Is that like kind of your end goal, or?
I would say so, but it would be maybe the majority, because we have a lot of our services running on virtual machines as well, and we have Prometheus exporters there. So it's best that those, let's say, remain untouched, and it's going to be more difficult to adapt them. But when it comes to our Kubernetes, I think we were going to go more with OTLP. Currently, everything is Prometheus, but we have the Kubernetes SD configs for the Prometheus receiver, which is amazing. And we also have the target allocator through the operator, which I have been testing, and I really liked it. So I think we're going to go completely, especially on Kubernetes and in the cloud, we're going to go completely on OpenTelemetry.
Cool. And like for going back to Kubernetes, like how many clusters are you typically are involved that you're observing?
I would say maybe 100 in total for different data centers. Yes, and thousands of virtual machines. We have a huge stack.
So your team is responsible then for ensuring that like if there's an issue with the operator, like you and your team are managing the OTel operator across all these Kubernetes clusters.
Exactly. That's why we're also trained in Kubernetes, all of us that are part of the team, because it's a very important part of our job to actually maintain everything.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you wear multiple hats. So you maintain the clusters as well, is what it sounds like, or
no,
just
only our stack on the clusters.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
We have a different team taking care of that.
Okay, cool. And I know I seem to recall I want to say like version 1.26 of Kubernetes, they enabled like some OTel capabilities as like an experimental feature. Is that something that you've ever dabbled with or heard of? Just curious.
Not yet, actually. No, I haven't come across it, but something that I can note and test it. There's always a lot to learn.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can find a link around that. I feel like it was a very sort of like nichey thing that was not often talked about, but I'd love to hear if anyone's played around with that. Now, for me, one of the things that I always love to hear is like how are teams structuring their collectors? Like, do you have one collector, multiple collector? If so, like, how are you deploying them? Do you deploy different configuration?
Yeah, we currently have an agent and central collector type of organization. Well, as I mentioned, we have, especially when it comes to Kubernetes clusters, we have a huge number of them. So having just one point of interest, it's going to be overwhelming. So we are deploying. Well, currently we have one OpenTelemetry agent in each of the clusters, and we are starting to substitute it with the OpenTelemetry operator, which has the collector and the auto instrumentation. So that's the end goal. That's where we're getting at. So everything is sent to a central collector where we do the obfuscation of data and the sampling and everything, and all that is sent currently. We're using Tempo, but in the future we might use a vendor, and basically there's going to be a central collector collecting all that per data center.
Okay, so you basically like each Kubernetes cluster has its own collector, and then they feed into like your central collector. And then where does your central collector reside? Does it reside on a VM? Does it reside on another Kubernetes cluster?
It's a Kubernetes cluster, and we call it a central collector because most of the stack on that cluster, it's dedicated to us. We have a lot of data, so we have a lot of requirements, memory and CPU wise. So most of the applications running in this cluster are for observability and very few for the platform. So yeah, that's where everything is.
Okay, cool. And then how do you ensure, if it like, because everything's being sent to that central collector, that becomes like a single point of failure. So how do you ensure that, if that goes down, what's your like backup plan?
Well, we have fallback clusters with fallback collectors. So if this one fails, goes to the other one immediately. We have also implemented. Well, it's not currently running, but we also have implemented that the OpenTelemetry collectors can send to as many exporters as possible. So we are currently using a fallback cluster to send. For example, if one fails, send to the other one, and we can immediately enable it without an issue. It's like a backup stack. Nice. Yeah, and we have equipped our collectors with we use autoscaling a lot. It's based on our metrics. So we make sure that our collectors have a lot of memory and CPU liberty, so their queues will be big as well. If there is a small downtime, everything will be saved into queue and then sent to the central collector.
Okay, awesome. And on that central continue on the collector thread, like what were some of the challenges that you experienced initially when you started implementing the collector? Because I would imagine, you said that you want to make sure you have like enough memory allocated. I'm assuming that might have been perhaps an initial challenge. Are there any others, or can you talk more about that?
Well, yeah, I think knowing the collector and how it works as a new technology introduced to us was the biggest challenge. We're very fortunate in Farfetch because we rely heavily on autoscaling. So the first thing that we did was to enable autoscaling, but we had to do some tests to see how it was working with a small amount of data because again, it was completely new, and it took us a while to know the memory and CPU requirements. So at the same time, we're not wasting a huge amount of money just to have this available, but at the same time we need to have this available because it is so crucial. So yeah, definitely the resources, memory and CPU are very important. Everything else, I would say the Helm charts in the community are so good. We just needed to use them, enable it, and of course modify everything, the configuration, basically the exporter, receivers, and that's it. But yeah, it was pretty straightforward when it comes to that.
Okay. And in terms of configuration, like, are you using any like any processors like to do any data masking or to like add attributes, remove attributes? Do you have custom processors? What's your processor story like on the collector?
Well, we're currently experimenting with processors. I think we only have the batch processor, whatever it is enabled by default on the shards.
The common one.
Yeah. But we are playing a lot with the data masking processors because especially for the logging part, in tracing and in metrics, we do not have any data that could be sensitive, but for logging, that's something that we are relying on heavily, and that's what we're testing the most. But currently, we haven't implemented anything special for the telemetry data that we are currently passing.
Cool. And I was curious because you mentioned like you're using traces, you're using metrics, playing around with logs. Within traces, are you aware of any teams like using span events, for example?
No, not yet, and that's something that we are really planning to introduce currently because of the limitations that we had with our previous tracing system. We had a very low sampling. It was 0.1%. The interest in the teams was not big. They didn't really care much about tracing. It was very rare finding an engineer that relied on tracing. So now that we implemented Tempo, OpenTelemetry, we are gradually increasing the sampling size and allowing more information to come through. And I think we are getting better at it, but still not there. That's part of our package of making traces first-class citizens.
Yay, that's what I love to hear. And I don't think this is a thing yet now, but my understanding and talking to a few of the OTel folks is that the idea is that the logs are going to replace the span events, because I mean, span events are basically like logs embedded in your traces anyway, but with the idea that obviously like that you have that correlation, you continue having that correlation, but I believe my understanding is also you get access to the fact that like the logs specification is a lot richer than the span events specification. So you get to take advantage of like having more information potentially at your disposal. So that's kind of a thing that I'm looking forward to personally. I noticed that Sebastian just posted a link on the chat with regards to the traces for Kubernetes cluster in version 1.27. So for anyone who
I'm not sure if that was the one that you were speaking of. I was just trying to find the reference.
Yeah. I believe that is the one. Yeah, that's super cool. I do seem to remember that for enabling it, you had to like go into like deep in the bowels of Kubernetes configuration to be able to enable that feature. So I think if you were using like a cloud provider, do so at your own risk kind of thing. I think it was a lot easier to use like if you're doing Kubernetes locally on your machine. But anyway, still a cool feature nonetheless. But definitely something that is worth exploring as it matures. Just going back to our discussion, I had a question also with regards to like, have you encountered any folks who were resistant to this whole open telemetry thing, like on development teams or even within your own team? Like what was the vibe around that? And if so, what did you do to help alleviate their stress?
To be honest, not really. It's curious actually. I haven't really met anyone that opposes it. Yeah, I've met plenty of people that simply do not care for it. Like they're like, okay, we have it. Okay, we do not have it. And in this situation, it's mostly, for example, someone asks for something related to observability and traces, and I'm like, hey, look at this cool thing that we did with OpenTelemetry. Now it is available for you. And they're like, okay. And I just keep sending things that I consider that are so cool and it's good for them to use. And that's pretty much it. And I know that they're going to use because it's a curiosity, but never had someone that was against it or like, no, we don't need it, so we shouldn't. It's interesting.
That's awesome. I think we need more companies like yours where people are like, yay, OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, we have a very good observability culture. I'm actually really, really proud of that. I mean, I'm proud because I'm helping continue and build it, but the previous team that worked with that, kudos to them.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think like that's where we really see success in OpenTelemetry is always having like a group of people who are like amazingly enthusiastic about it and are just like out there and believe in it and want to make sure that it happens. So and I know like Shubhanshu, who's also on the call, like he's done a lot of evangelism around OpenTelemetry in his organization, which is super awesome. So, hats off to y'all who do that in your organizations, because I think it's going to keep helping make OpenTelemetry awesome. Now, is your organization at the point now where you've started to like make contributions to OpenTelemetry, or is that still something where you're like not there yet?
Yes, actually, we made a contribution recently to the operator because of the certification. I think the certification was relying on Cert Manager and not with custom certificates, and that didn't work for us. So there was a feature request and then a merge request to fix that, and that's why we are working so heavily now with the operator, so we can use our own certificates basically until Cert Manager is available for us as well.
That is so cool. How did it feel like making that contribution?
It was great. Well, actually, it was a joint effort. Our architect was the main figure, let's say, after this. But yeah, it feels great, and the community is super welcoming, and like it was approved so fast because when he submitted the feature request, we were thinking that it was going to take like months. We were like, okay, yeah, we will have to wait. And then a week later, he's like, hey, guess what? It's merged. Let's go forward and test it. It's amazing.
That is so cool. Yeah, I'm always like a huge fan of that, like don't wait around for the feature request, just do it yourself. So it's really cool that that you and your team were able to achieve that. I think that's like, I think it's a great accomplishment because like putting yourself out there for open source is like, you have to be vulnerable and you have to be okay with people saying like, well, that's not really correct.
So scary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like super scary, right? So yay, congrats. That's super amazing. I hope the team continues to make OTel contributions. One thing I wanted to pivot to is like I'm so happy that you have like awesome things to say about OpenTelemetry. Is there anything that you think you and your team have encountered where OpenTelemetry could improve? Because that's, that feedback is also super important so that we can continue to improve as a whole.
Well, to be honest, I've had a super positive experience with it. Working with it every step of the way has been super easy, and there's been a lot of support from the community. And yeah, the only thing that I would say maybe is that it is a bit lacking in the documentation in some parts. For example, when I was implementing the Prometheus receiver first, it was very confusing to use. I was using the console SD config, and it was a mess, and I couldn't find information anywhere on how to implement it or some good documentation that of course I'm planning to contribute to that. But that's all that I would have to say. It takes a bit longer to figure it out, or you have to dig very, very deep to find some documentation for certain features, exporters or receivers. But other than that, it's been an amazing experience.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I have to agree with you. Sometimes it is a bit of an archaeological dig. So anything that can be done to help bring that up to the surface is most welcome. So we definitely look forward to a contribution to to the docs. And also, like, for anyone on here, like, who's, you know, played around with OpenTelemetry, like, you can always submit a pull request to OpenTelemetry.io repo if you want to, like, write a blog post about anything OTel related, because I know the comms folks are always looking for contributions. And so also, if like you're looking for a first contribution on OpenTelemetry, that is a great place to start. Now, you know, like, let's turn the tables around to our lovely audience here today. Does anybody have any questions for Iris? No burning questions? We all good?
I don't have any, but want to say thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I will second that to both of you. I think you covered a lot, Adriana, and Iris gave a pretty good insight into her company. It's amazing to see how little objections there are to change, not just observability, but change in general. So it's nice to see. Almost wish, like, can I have some of it? I've been grinding for the last year, basically talking observability and OTel nonstop. And I finally make some inways, I think. But yeah, it's nice to see that there are easier companies or easier paths. Not everybody has struggles the same. It's good to know.
Yeah, that's so true. I think my experience in the past has also been like, it's the uphill battle to OpenTelemetry. So it is so refreshing to hear like such a lovely, positive story that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are people who get it.
There is indeed, but now it's becoming. I think it is the second most contributed project and one of the most well known. So more people are getting a smell of it. So it's getting more and more accepted, I would say, than it was 1 year ago.
Yeah, so true. Like when I started dabbling around in OpenTelemetry, like Trace's specification wasn't even finalized. I was pushing the organization I was at the time to be like, OpenTelemetry is going to be the big thing, y'all. And they're like, uh-huh. So it was an uphill battle. I feel like now at least like a lot of the specs are like finalized, so it makes for a very compelling narrative, and you get more and more user stories of people like actually using this in production, even if it's like, you know, a little bit like, you know, kind of like where Farfetch is at, where you're not like fully productionalized, but you've got some stuff running in production. And I think that's a compelling story to tell as well, right? Which is like, get it out there, start using it, right? I think that's a really great message to share with folks. Do you have any like parting thoughts?
I was gonna say something as well. Like we're, it's not fully there, but we're passing a crazy amount of data through those collectors, and they're tough. Trust me, they're tough. It's worth it. It's like it might be difficult to convince your peers to start implementing it, but it's worth it. They are durable collectors. Like you can pass like thousands and millions of data per second, per minute, and if you do a good job at auto-scaling, it's gonna manage.
How much memory and CPU are they using while doing that kind of load? Do you know offhand?
Well, when we were passing just traces around 30,000 spans per second, I think we were like at around 8 gigabytes of memory. And I don't know how many, honestly, I don't remember how many instances of the collector we were running, but maybe like 4, but around 8 gigabytes.
Cool, thank you.
One question from your earlier conversation about using OpenTelemetry metrics and OpenTelemetry tracing. Are you guys using correlation in any way in terms of the metric data, trace data, or log data at all, or at this moment that's still something you are exploring?
Something that we're still exploring. Our first traces metrics correlation that we're doing, we're investigating through OpenTelemetry, but it was let's say, easier for us to implement it through Tempo. They have a metrics generator, and that's what we were doing. We are generating some metrics from traces, but we're planning to move that to OpenTelemetry because, it's best. It was just easier for us that way. Still exploring.
There's a question from Sebastian.
Yeah, I was curious. Your organization sounds rather sizable. Are you at all concerned about the amount of data that in totality you end up like producing, transporting, and collecting? And I guess a follow-up question to that would be then, how do you advocate for valuable data versus just data for the sake of it?
When it comes to the sizing and how much data we're actually processing, we were doing the same before, but they were going through different routes. For example, Jaeger Collector, Prometheus, and Thanos, and now everything is going through OpenTelemetry. So the amount of data is not very troubling because we've been working with it for so long that we can actually know how to handle and know how much our stack can handle. So that's not really a problem. But of course, in tracing wise, we're increasing a lot, and it's a very gradual increase because that's where we're scared of adding stuff on top of what we already had in the past. So that's very gradual, but so far it's been going well, and we move with a lot of caution and always have a backup plan in mind. So it's been okay. Now I don't want to brag, and tomorrow we are going to have a huge incident when it comes to that. But yeah, I think we're moving very cautiously when it comes to this.
You need to knock on wood, you know that, right? If you're saying something like that.
Yeah, right now. Because I'm on call as well this week, so that's gonna be like the cherry on top. And when it comes to quality data, that's something that we're really, really hard working on, because in traces and metrics, we're actually doing a very good job at it, because it's been, especially metrics, it's been our main focus. So we are constantly cleaning up, having guidelines, and the teams are very cooperative. Traces, we're getting there, and because it was such a small amount of traces, really people didn't really care much about, because it was such small sampling size. And now we are being very cautious on what is being increased and what is being passed. Logs is where we're actually working a lot, but OpenTelemetry, we're hoping that it's going to help us, and that's why we're investigating it a lot, especially the processors. It's mostly publishing guidelines, having meetings, conferences within the company. We have some requirements that, if, for example, if you need to do an increased amount, a crazy amount of data, for example, metrics to 3 times the metrics that you were sending before, you have to open a service request, and us as a team go there and check it out and talk together what is necessary and what is not. So it has to go through these processes. Only the big changes, the small ones usually are something that our stack can handle very well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Iris? Well, if you like what you heard today, Iris will be back for our OTel in practice session on June the 8th. And it's going to be, I believe, at the same time. So keep an eye out for an invite then. And why don't you tell folks what you'll be presenting about?
Well, my topic will be observability as a team sport. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about. And I see that in many companies, the observability teams are the ones that are making the guidelines, instrumenting the code, creating the alerts and responding to them. And I am completely against that. I think that observability, everyone should do their part. Engineers know their code and their product better. Us as observability engineers are there to help them and empower them and provide the tools, but they should be the one taking charge when it comes to this part. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Awesome. I cannot wait to hear this this talk. So that'll be on June 8th at 1 o'clock Eastern, which is 10 o'clock Pacific, and +6 in Central European time. I think it's going to be awesome. So I hope y'all can join, and tell your friends. We would love to have more people hear what Idis has to say, because I think it's awesome. I think you're a great champion of OpenTelemetry, so keep on keeping on. This was great. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And if you have a friend who or if you yourself are interested in being participating in one of these Q&As or even OTel in practice, please reach out to either to Reese or Rin or me on the OTel End Users Slack. We are more than happy to hear your stories and help folks share them with the world. And we will be providing a blog post summary of today's Q&A for all to see. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Thank you, everyone.